"If you're the wife of the eldest son, come to my house and take care of me," said my father-in-law. "Sure, I'll take care of you as you wish." "You can't do anything, can you?" "It's too late to regret it now. My name is Evelyn and I'm 40 years old. Recently, my daughter brought home a kitten that is very enthusiastic about work and is constantly peeling off the wallpaper in the house. The cat looks at me with round eyes like, "Is there a problem, meow," and so on. Oh. It's so cute. Unlike cats, there are things that are not cute about humans. In my life, there was only one person I hated so much that I gritted my teeth and said, "I'll never forgive you." That person was my father-in-law. I met my father-in-law for the first time when I went to my husband Owen's house to greet him for our marriage. My husband's parents' house is in the countryside of Nebraska, where you have to cross a long farm road to finally see the house. It's natural not to lock the house, and even I, who grew up in the countryside of Nebraska, was really surprised. However, the most surprising thing was his father. My husband had told me in advance, "My father is a little strange, so don't worry about it. You can ignore him." According to my husband, he's not human, he's a monster. I was nervous about what kind of monster would come out, but he turned out to be an exceptional talent beyond my imagination. When my husband and I were led to the living room by his sister Aurora, her father shouted, "You guys. Did you come in through the front door?" According to her father, only his wife, my husband's mother, and the head of the family, my husband's father, are allowed to use the front door, and other humans are supposed to use the back door. I didn't understand why I couldn't use the front door at all, and I was stunned, but my husband and his sister sighed as if they were fed up with it. Apparently, his sister also thinks her father is a nuisance, just like my husband. Even though I didn't know much about her father, I realized in just a moment that he was a monster. When her mother came from the kitchen and brought us tea while apologizing, her father sat down as if it were natural. Her mother also handed the tea to her husband with a familiar touch. Our tea was not handed to us, but placed on the table. No, I didn't want to drink it by hand, so it didn't matter. Somehow, the scene looked very strange. After a brief self-introduction, my husband's sister asked me, "Are you a web designer, Evelyn?" Aurora also seems to be working in IT, and the conversation was about to get lively. My husband's father said, "It's ridiculous for a woman to work. You can't work like a man, so you women should just have children and contribute to the family." My husband's father looked at us with disgust from the bottom of his heart and sighed, "Oh," in a deliberate manner. I could tell that my husband's sister was in a fighting mood, and my husband's mother calmed her down. "Ugh, Dad, go over there. I don't need your permission to marry my girlfriend." The air in the room froze in an instant. "You're the eldest son, but you're still a child. It's 100 years too early for you to stand up to your parents. Your brain is 100 years old, isn't it?" His sister burst out laughing at my husband's words, and his mother desperately tried to calm her husband down. What is this home drama? This stubborn father is actually a sentimental family man, and his favorite food is cookies, rather than alcohol. I knew from the first episode that it wasn't that kind of scenario. In the end, my husband's mother worked hard to please my husband's father by bringing more sweets and carrying alcohol in between. If I marry into this family, will I become like this too? I shuddered. Still, my husband and I got married. It took courage to marry into that family, but when my sister-in-law and my husband's 3 people met later, they promised to protect me if anything happened, which gave me a boost after the wedding. In fact, my sister-in-law is still only 25 years old, but she is always being urged by her father-in-law to get married soon, and she always feels uncomfortable. My husband has been told since he was a child, "You're too girly. You're too kind to women," and he left home when he went to high school. Actually, my mother-in-law also realizes that my father-in-law is wrong, but she seems to be reluctant to leave him because she has been with him for so long. She also told me that she would not let me do that, even if she had to work hard for her husband. Everyone except my father-in-law was normal, so I was able to prepare myself and move forward with the marriage. After that, we only met at the wedding, and my husband's arrangements meant that we never had to visit his parents' house again. For years after our marriage, my husband's grandmother passed away, and we went to the countryside for the funeral. The ceremony itself ended without incident, but a problem arose when we had a party with all the relatives after the funeral, perhaps due to local customs. "You, take me a glass of wine." Suddenly, my father-in-law from the back seat called out to me and told me to take him a glass of wine. He seemed to be a little drunk, but I was more concerned about being ordered around by someone who didn't even call my husband a "you." I'm not your wife. Irritated, I take him a glass of wine, and my father-in-law drank it with satisfaction. Immediately afterwards. You finally showed up, you unfilial child. I was once again filled with frustration. I'm not even raised by you, so how can I be filial? Are you still working outside? Yes, I am. I'm still doing it. You're still playing at work without showing the face of a successor. You can't live without being supported by a man, can you? If it weren't for the funeral, I might have said, I've been living on my own until I met your son, or something like that. When I was silent, my father-in-law seemed to think he had gotten the better of me and started talking happily. You know too, don't you? After you turn 30, you're past your prime as a mother. If you make a grandchild with aging genes that can't do anything, I won't forgive you. Normally, it's about time for the eldest son's wife to propose living together. I've been waiting for you for so long, but you haven't said anything, so I was going to give you a lecture today. Perhaps because he was in a good mood, my father-in-law's voice became louder at that moment. My sister-in-law, who was clearly angry, put her foot down between me and my father-in-law. Shut up. Don't say outdated things. What did you say? You're cheeky to your parents. That's why you're almost 30 and still have no prospects for a wife. Look, your cousin and second cousin have gone home with their husbands. With that, my father-in-law stood up and pointed to her cousins and second cousin. Thanks to that, everyone's attention was focused on us, and my husband and my mother-in-law, who was talking with relatives in the distance, seemed to have noticed the commotion. Owen's wife and Aurora, you can't do anything but act like you're all that. You women should just listen to what men say quietly. Why don't you understand that having children is your job? In our day, everyone knew that as a matter of course. Hey, Owen. Can you hear me? Return this wife with no good points to her parents' house right now. We don't need a stupid woman with a declining ability to have children. Anyway, it seems that there are more people in this house who agree with my father-in-law's opinion, and my sister-in-law and I were laughed at by all the relatives. Even my sister's cousins and second cousin were mocking my sister-in-law. I felt sorry for getting her involved in this because she helped me. My husband rushed over and shouted at his father, "What are you saying to my wife?" and took me and my sister-in-law out of there, but he couldn't drive because he had been drinking. We had to call a taxi and leave the countryside. My husband and sister-in-law apologized to me many times, and I felt more sorry for them. When I think back to my father-in-law's words, I'm right, which he said as if he were giving a solo performance. Should I quit my job? I wonder. Later, I received an apology from my mother-in-law for leaving my side at that time. Everyone except my father-in-law is really kind to me. My husband thinks that children are a gift, so there is no need to force them to have children. But what does my mother-in-law really think? It's only natural to want grandchildren. One day, my father-in-law suddenly came to our house. We had only told my mother-in-law our address, so both my husband and I were frozen in place. What's up with you, Dad? My husband's voice was a little high-pitched. It's not you I need, he laughed. Your mother-in-law has been hospitalized. If you're the wife of the eldest son, come to my house and take care of me. If you refuse, I'll make you divorce. My husband couldn't help but shout, "Are you kidding me?" I didn't understand what he meant for a moment. In short, my mother-in-law was hospitalized, so he wanted me to take her place. And if I refused, he would make us divorce. It turns out that my mother-in-law was only hospitalized for a checkup, so she would only be away from home for about a day and a half. He had flown a taxi from the countryside because he didn't want to do housework during that time. Wait a minute. While listening vaguely to my husband and father-in-law arguing, I came up with a good idea. Ha! 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 Why don't I take care of him as much as I can? I smiled and replied to my father-in-law, "Sure," and my husband's eyes widened. Stop it. My mother isn't sick. He won't die if he's alone for a day and a half. My husband was in a hurry. It's okay, darling. I also wanted to work as the wife of the eldest son, so please let me do it. I smiled, and my father-in-law rubbed his chin with satisfaction, saying, "Has the wife of the eldest son finally realized her position?" My husband agreed with a worried look, saying, "Then I'll go too." And so began our day and a half of filial piety. When we arrived in the countryside in my husband's car, it was time to start preparing dinner. Even though we were supposed to have come back together, my father-in-law urged us to hurry up and eat, saying, "Is dinner ready yet?" In this house, it seems that I have to make dinner while I'm in the car. I'll buy the ingredients, so please wait a moment. I'll make it soon. I answered, and my father-in-law snorted and said, then prepare the bath first and then go. I prepared the bath as he wished and told him to go ahead and take a bath, and my husband and I went shopping. When we returned from a supermarket about an hour's drive away, my angry father-in-law was waiting for us at the front entrance. I told you not to use the front entrance. And what was that bath earlier? My father-in-law shouted at me. What's wrong? What's wrong? The bath was cold water. Don't mess with me. I'm sorry. I'm just a wife with no good points, so I don't know the difference between water and hot water in an unfamiliar house. I just made a mistake. You're doing housework half-heartedly, enough. Hurry up and make dinner. He usually eats 3 meals a day, but today he skipped lunch because my mother-in-law wasn't there. He must be hungry, so my father-in-law didn't blame me for the bath anymore and just wanted to eat. I'll make it up to you by cooking with all my heart. I answered and headed to the kitchen. My husband was hiding his face, but he was laughing all the time. No wonder, the cold bath was on purpose. I had told my husband everything when we went shopping. If he had used his head a little, he could have avoided taking a cold bath by checking if there was steam or not. He must have immersed himself in the bath without thinking too much about it. You didn't soak in hot water if it was a cold bath, did you? I'm sorry. I've prepared hot water, so please take a bath. While preparing for dinner, I recommended that my father-in-law take another bath, and he said, that's very thoughtful of you, and headed to the bath. I checked the hot water supply switch in the kitchen. The temperature was okay. And within a minute. Oh my God. I heard him scream from the bathroom. My husband couldn't help but ask, what happened, and went to the bathroom on purpose. I'm a woman. I didn't want to see my naked father-in-law, so I asked my husband to go. My father-in-law was screaming, the bath is hot. Of course, he had raised the temperature to nearly 50 degrees Celsius as soon as he got in. The water outlet must have become very hot. Both cold and hot baths are dangerous in winter, but it's safe in summer. What? It's not. Well, please overlook that. By the way, since the temperature was restored instantly, my father-in-law didn't know what had happened. My father-in-law, who returned to the living room exhausted, asked, why did the bath suddenly get so hot, and I answered, is it because it's old? Since he doesn't usually do housework and leaves everything to his wife, he probably doesn't even know what the hot water supply button in the kitchen does. After all, I heard from my husband that he was the kind of person who got angry when men stood in the kitchen. I served dinner to my exhausted father-in-law, saying, it's ready. What is this? It's porridge, pumpkin, and sweet potato. Why is it so simmering? Father-in-law, don't you know about baby food? At that moment, my father-in-law got angry and stood up, saying, don't make fun of me. What's been going on with you since earlier? You can't do any housework. Why do I have to eat baby food? Because you can't do anything, I adjusted it to your mental age. I've prepared baby food for a 5-month-old baby. My husband laughed and said, so is dad a 50-year-old baby? Now, please eat it before it gets cold. I warmed up the prepackaged food with all my might. You can't even make prepackaged food by yourself, can you? Please be grateful. Do you think it's okay to talk to me like that? I smiled at my trembling father-in-law. Oh. But isn't it true? If you're just missing my mother-in-law for a day, you could have managed with retort food, but you took us because you couldn't do anything. Remake it without saying anything. I won't eat this. I only bought that when I went shopping for ingredients, so if you don't eat baby food, there will be no dinner. What? Are you kidding me? My father-in-law looked at my husband as if he wanted to say that. Didn't you give me $10 and tell me to buy dinner? It's hard enough to keep it under $10, and don't you realize that the countryside supermarket is almost out of stock in the late afternoon? You're hopeless. Father-in-law is still a baby. I don't understand anything about American prices. Oh, I see. It's still your first errand. My father-in-law, who saw me and my husband grinning, muttered, are you telling me to stay hungry, while turning pale? You can manage for a day even if you're hungry. Or you can go to the supermarket and buy it yourself. That's right, father-in-law. Let's try your first errand. I'll watch you from behind the scenes. If you don't like it, eat baby food. Oh, do you need help with your meal? You're a baby. Since we've never raised children, it might fail. Let's do our best as an experiment before raising children. Life is trial and error. No, if you make an error in your life, it will end there. We laughed, and my father-in-law looked at us with a dumbfounded expression. Given his personality, my father-in-law probably didn't want to go shopping or eat baby food while being teased by us. It seemed that his pride as a head of household and his shame as a man and a father were fighting. If it were me, I would eat baby food because I don't want to bother with shopping. That's right. My wife must have some instant food in stock. Muttering like a delusion, my father-in-law staggered toward the kitchen. Huh? Are you going into the kitchen even though you're a man, Dad? My father-in-law turned around with a despairing face and groaned, this bastard, since he had been developing his own theory as if it were the right one, it was probably annoying to take it back conveniently now. He seemed to want to go to the kitchen, but he couldn't, and he stayed there as if he couldn't say it. Oh. You're one step away. Let's do our best for your first kitchen debut. Come on, be brave. I said that and went to the kitchen, saying, this way, and tried to guide my father-in-law with clapping hands. I had instant food hidden in one hand. Of course, my father-in-law would be angry, but my husband also said, come on, Nolan, do your best, and cheered him on by calling him by his first name. There was no longer anyone on my father-in-law's side in this place. Whatever he did, he was just laughed at. If he wants to eat instant food, he has no choice but to enter the kitchen. If you're a man, you should enter the kitchen boldly. Or are you a weak baby who can't eat without a woman around? That's right, Dad. You're not an old man who can't live alone without a woman, are you? My father-in-law had an angry expression and said, I don't care anymore, and left the house. I wondered what he would do without a destination, but he didn't come back while we were waiting for him to return home. We stayed at my in-laws' house that night. Late at night, I heard a loud voice, so I went to the entrance suspiciously, and my father-in-law was crying and shouting, open the door. I had completely forgotten, but this area doesn't have a custom of locking the door. Since my husband and I always lock the door as a matter of course, we carelessly locked the door, thinking my father-in-law has the key. I'm sorry. I apologized as I opened the door, and at that moment. I'm sorry. Please let me in and I'll apologize. My father-in-law apologized. Apparently, he thought he had been locked out. Even though this area is where wild creatures hold meetings at night, he may have felt uneasy even though he was from the countryside. The accidental lockout had a tremendous effect, and my father-in-law seemed to have repented. The next day. When I told my mother-in-law about what had happened, she thundered at my father-in-law, don't bother your children who have left the nest with trivial things. After that, my usually gentle mother-in-law gave a more than 3-hour aggressive lecture, and divorce was hinted at. It seemed to be an anger that my father-in-law had never seen before, and since then, the head of household father-in-law has disappeared, and he has been doing housework while watching my mother-in-law's facial expressions. Male chauvinism is probably inherent, and it is not completely improved, so sometimes the words that irritate women are mixed in, so my husband, my sister-in-law, and I decided to keep our distance from my father-in-law. Years later, my sister-in-law also got married and had a child at the same time as my husband and me, but my father-in-law still hasn't seen his grandchild. My mother-in-law instructed us not to let him see his grandchild because she didn't want her grandchildren to have an old-fashioned way of thinking. I think my father-in-law has already repented enough, but if male chauvinism is completely cured, I want to introduce my daughter to him. Probably that day will never come. After that incident, my sister-in-law thanked me, saying, I was trying to protect my sister-in-law, but I might have been helped. Thank you for rehabilitating my stubborn father. My father-in-law aside, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law have been getting along well since then. By the way, I thought that I wouldn't be able to work after having a child, but fortunately, I was able to continue working even after giving birth. It was thanks to the fact that my boss became a woman at the time of my pregnancy. I was considering resigning, so I'm glad that I can still do what I want to do in the future. Thanks to the increase in work style options such as remote work, I have more time to spend with my child. Well, my child has been obsessed with kittens lately. My husband and I repeat the days when we complain while looking at the wallpaper scratched by the kitten, it was a new house, and there's still a lone left, and are completely charmed by the cute kitten and the smile of our child, and forgive them. Oh well, you can scratch the wallpaper as much as you want. Let's work hard. But then I saw my child carving the wall with a sculpture knife she bought at school, so I take back what I said. Oh, a new house. I sigh, but my mouth loosens at the heartwarming sight. I want to protect such happy days in the future. That's what I think.